We will have the full NFL schedule released on Wednesday. We do have one early confirmation. There probably will be others before we get the full schedule on Wednesday. But in a rematch from 2017, the Minnesota Vikings will be the visiting team against the Cleveland Browns in London, England. Let's talk about that and more. Browns 3D starts now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, and Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network can be found Monday through Friday at 6 p.m., kicking off our nightly streaming network here at the OBR. You will have the React later tonight. Pete Smith and Brad Ward, always a fantastic show. Garage Beers, Mike Keefe after that. There will be a special live episode tomorrow evening, as you will get all of our reactions as we get the full 2025 NFL schedule for all teams, but most certainly we'll be breaking down everything from the Cleveland Browns standpoint. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd, and we appreciate you all for being here, and we appreciate you all for supporting us over at the OBR like you do, whether it is the written content or whether it is joining us every night for the nightly streaming network. We'll start here real quick. Not that anybody's surprised, but it is October 5th, 9:30 in the morning. So, get a good night's sleep, get up early, get your errands done and be on the couch. 9:30, Minnesota Vikings, Cleveland Browns from England, London, England, of course. Now, this, was a game in 2017. And I remember obviously well, because this was early, the infancy of my time covering the Cleveland Browns. I remember the game very well. One of the reasons I remember is Myles Garrett never made the trip. Myles Garrett had suffered a concussion, so he didn't even make the trip overseas. You want a little quick blast from the past, though? 2017, Minnesota Vikings 33, Cleveland Browns 16. Quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings that day, Case Keenum. 27 of 43, 288 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Jet McKinnon, 50 yards on the ground and a touchdown for Minnesota as well. Leading receiver was Adam Thielen. Jet McKinnon was a nuisance as well in the receiving game. 6 receptions, 72 yards. You want a blast from the past? Here you go, Brownies. Here you go, Browns fans. DeShone Kizer that day, 18 of 34 for 179 yards. He was sacked 3 times. On the ground, Isaiah Crowell, 11 carries, 64 yards, scored a touchdown. DeShone Kizer also had a rushing touchdown in that game. Isaiah Crowell was your leading receiver, 4 receptions for 54 yards. Ricardo Lewis, 2 receptions for 42 yards. David Njoku, 2 for 19. Let's see what else we got here. My man, Hollywood Higgins, 1 reception for 14 yards. Sammy Coates, 2 for 13. Duke Johnson had 4 receptions for 10 yards. My man, Joe Schobert, was a beast that day. 12 tackles, 11 solo, half a tackle for loss. And the Browns had 1 sack that day. And that 1 sack was, of course, by Carl Nassib. We'll do it all again. 9 years later, 2015, Vikings, Browns. Now, obviously, with everything, schedule coming tomorrow, we got to see the rookies mixed in with the veterans today. There was a great shot, I'm sure you all saw it, of all 4 quarterbacks basically standing in a team setting, listening to the coaches speak. First note, the Dillon Gabriel height talk just needs to die. Just stop it. It's so stinking annoying. All right. The memes, the shrinking of the pictures, those are actually kind of funny. People who are getting the rocks off because Dillon Gabriel isn't 6 feet tall, again, who, couldn't hold the guy's jock as far as athleticism. Just stop. It's embarrassing. Whatever. Get your shots off, whatever. You sound like clowns. Just let it go. We know Joe Flacco's tall. We know Kenny Pickett's pretty tall. We know Shedeur Sanders is kind of tall. We know Dillon Gabriel for a quarterback is not tall. Enough. Just let it go. let it be stinking over at this point in time. I want to double back a little bit to what we were talking about yesterday. And the more I've talked about it and the more I've kind of thought about it, the more I'm talking myself into it. And, this certainly can change, through, organized team activities, through, official team training camps, certainly through training camps, certainly through preseason games. But I think I've come to the point where I don't care. I want every game in 2025 for the Cleveland Browns at the quarterback position started by Shedeur Sanders or by Dillon Gabriel. I don't need to try to piece together a 6-11, 7-10, 5-12 season with Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett. If I can achieve 5 wins, 6 wins, 7 wins with Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel, that means a whole hell of a lot more than it ever would doing it with Joe Flacco or doing it with Kenny Pickett. It would mean that, either one of the rookie quarterbacks or both of the rookie quarterbacks showed well at times. It would mean, that the team obviously had their other young players step up and perform. I think it's just the way to go at this point. And, for those who think that there is this magical number of wins that, keep Kevin Stefanski or Andrew Berry or both, to keep their jobs or to lose their jobs, I don't know if I'm buying it. I got to be honest. I talked about this with Brad Ward last week. I think this is more about how the product looks as opposed to, just basically saying a record. Team could be 6-11 and be the hottest of hot messes. The team could be 4-13 and could show a lot of promise. How are you losing those games? Are you losing by double digits every week? Yeah, if that's the case, Kevin, Andrew, everybody should be nervous. It's a unique situation, certainly where you have 2 rookie quarterbacks. And it's not like the RG3 Kirk Cousins thing years ago where basically you established that, one was the guy and the other one you liked and you liked his potential. And obviously that whole situation, snowballed and became a thing of itself. And, Kirk Cousins obviously ended up having, a pretty long and established career in the league, still in the league, I guess, totally around it. Atlanta, whatever's going on down there, right? But again, you have this unique situation where you have these 2 guys who have played a decent amount of college football. In Dillon Gabriel's case, a large amount of college football. Again, I don't think there's much more developing these guys. I think these guys at their age, their collegiate experience, their collegiate playing time, certainly their performance in college tells you that the waiting game doesn't matter to either one of these guys. It's just seeing if they can get their skills to translate to the NFL level. So playing Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett for a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, I don't think it does anything for me. Like we're talking about this London game here as week 5, this better not be the first appearance, in my opinion, for one of the rookie quarterbacks to start. I just, and I know there's going to be the people who say, oh, well, you kind of got to justify and you got to look out for the veterans. They deserve every chance to win. Yeah, they do. Sure. But, I'm not sure that Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco give you enough to say that this team would make to the playoffs. And that's literally what it's about. I mean, I know, and I've talked about NFL teams, that's why they do it. Everybody thinks they have a shot, and you see where you're at 5 weeks in, 6 weeks in. And we'll see. And, my belief in my theory here of just letting the rookies start from day one and figure out how you're going to do it may change a little bit when I actually see a schedule tomorrow and see, who the first couple of games are. You tell me week 1 in Baltimore. Yeah, Joe Flacco can start that one. Or, some of the other games, they're playing Buffalo, of course, they're playing the rest of the AFC East. They are playing the NFC North, of which one of those games we already know. Detroit is not going to be easy. Green Bay is not going to be easy. The Bears are, should be better. Don't know exactly where the Bears are at. Certainly a lot different team than the Cleveland Browns saw in 2023, of course. But for me, yeah, let's get the kids on the field and let's just get at it already. The Bengals and Trey Hendrickson. I don't blame Trey Hendrickson one iota. And I don't necessarily blame the Bengals. It's not that, Trey Hendrickson has not been fantastic for them, because he absolutely has. But, he's the one in his 30s. Burrow is not in his 30s. Chase is not in his 30s. Higgins is not in his 30s. They're the future and the foundation of that team in Cincinnati. I just think it's a poor look, because it certainly seems to me like Cincinnati just ain't got the money. The problem is Cincinnati made it sound like, hey, if we really want to, we can handle this financial business. Now it looks an awful lot like you can't. And a month before players were supposed to start showing up for activities, your head coach has the gall to communicate with Trey Hendrickson and remind him he could be fined if he doesn't show up. Really? Really? First off, we know that's the deal. But second of all, no communication, which Trey Hendrickson has told us, and there hasn't been anybody from Cincinnati to dispute. You're disrespecting your best defensive player. Just jerking him around, not giving him his money. And you're going to be hard on him about showing up and letting him know that there could be fines and consequences for his actions. Anybody wants to get angry with the Browns, any of you Browns fans want to get said, look at Cincinnati and look how it's handled financially. Because I'll honestly believe right now, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, I'll give it 2 more seasons, if that. I'll give it 25 and 26. But I doubt that whole band will be together much longer after that. Cincinnati just does not have the finances. They don't know how to create the finances. They are not good with cap and structure and manipulating money. It's a poverty franchise. There, I said it. They just don't know what they're doing. They got lucky. Got Burrow at number 1 overall. Burrow played a little bit. You got Higgins right after that in the second round. Burrow played a little bit as a rookie. Got hurt. Missed more than half the season. You walked right into Jamar Chase, and you had a nice thing going. But the problem is Cincinnati just ain't equipped to build something long term. Now, I wanted to get a little bit more into, the JOK thing. And, and it is sad. It is. Again, all of us, at the end of the day, people who like me, look, we cover this team, we do all of this stuff. Absolutely. But we're still fans. Absolutely. And, Jeremiah was, he was different from Miles just because, kind of put himself out there, a little bit more as a fiery type leader. And none of this is anything to give, like I'm putting any shade towards Miles Garrett. JOK was just such a fiery guy, and obviously plays he were making were certainly a lot different than plays we were seeing Miles Garrett make. And, literally to become the fire plug and, basically the quarterback of the defense. And now, I don't know if I want to say the torch has been passed or the torch is going to be passed. You look at that linebacker room now, you have Jordan Hicks. Devin Bush is there. I don't know how to clarify that. Obviously with some sort of asterisk, he is there. Of course, you drafted Carson Swissinger, Mahmoud Diabate, Winston Reed, Buki Watson, and Jerome Baker. It's not a bad room. It's not a bad room. One of the biggest questions you have as far as, what type of success can they give this team in 2025 certainly comes down to, you know, Jordan Hicks. The Browns didn't get all of Jordan Hicks last year. Certainly a lot of time missed. Um, so hopefully, they're going to get their full money's worth this year from Jordan Hicks. You know, Baker Baker's been a player in this league. He's been, I don't want to say, a top linebacker in this league. He has been a good serviceable linebacker in this league. Um, I think I might like Mahmoud Diabate a little bit more than I think maybe the Cleveland Browns do. And I'm not saying I know anything here, I've heard anything here, but they keep making linebacker moves. They kept making linebacker moves last year after Diabate got to play as a rookie. They kept making some linebacker moves this offseason after Diabate got to play a bunch last year as well. Maybe I like Mahmoud Diabate more than they do, you know, or they just maybe like, Diabate more as, a guy that plays on specials. Certainly could be the case. But I think this room right now is all in on about what Carson Swissinger can be. And again, the more you learn on Carson Swissinger, the more, you watch of Carson Swissinger this past fall out in Westwood at UCLA. I think the more you're just taken aback. First off, it was his first real season getting, legit playing time on the defensive unit as opposed to just being a special teamer. Certainly got an NFL build. He's got really, really good legs. Shows you how, certainly shows in his tackling ability. Good size, a little bit bigger than what today's average NFL linebacker is built like or looks like. And, I said it at the time, I've said it, a day or two after, and I'll continue to say it. With only one legit year of playing time in college, you have to believe there is a second jump coming from Carson Swissinger. Again, it may take a little bit. It may not be a week one thing. Carson Swissinger goes out there and, gives you 10 tackles, 8 solo, a sack, and a pick. But midway through his rookie year, maybe towards the end of his rookie year, you're going to see that I think Carson Swissinger is going to turn out to be an even better talent, better producer than the Browns even thought he was going to be when they actually drafted him at number 33 overall in April. How the rest of the room shakes out, I mean, your best three on the field could be a combination of Hicks, Swissinger, Baker. Certainly, if Devin Bush's legal situation is straightened out, he would factor into that. Probably your four best linebackers in that room. Still has potential to be a good group. And the biggest thing, for this group, the linebacker position, as far as, being deemed a good unit, being deemed a successful unit in 2025 will be Schlesinger hopefully playing to some, not all the way there, but to some sort of level around Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Again, it was weird at the time. I think we all knew what it meant when the name was announced and that the Browns selected a linebacker at 33 overall. Still stinks, still hurts, still sucks. Hopefully this year, can get Jeremiah right to where we could actually see him as part of this team, as part of this defense again in the future. But, unfortunately, the Lord sometimes works in some tricky ways. And bad things do happen to good people, right? As we get into OTAs and mandatory mini camp, I think a lot of the questions are certainly going to be about certain positional groups, and some people will have questions about certainly the offensive line, health wise, that type of stuff. But you're not really going to get a read on that in anything that's going to be done, in a mini camp camp setting, or certainly in an OTA type setting. The contact is certainly minimal, which it should be. But I think right off the bat, wide receiver's got to be one that everybody's kind of looking at. I think everybody is probably kind of confident in what Jerry Jeudy can do. Although it's kind of terrible that you think you're going to put through Jerry Jeudy through this again, where it's just going to, could possibly be a revolving door at the quarterback position. It's, it's, it's unfair. It's the way it is, obviously. You know, can it be prevented? Sure, it could be prevented. Absolutely. Um, I don't think it's gonna be. You know, if you're telling me it's just Sanders, Shedeur, and a lot of Dillon Gabriel, and that's the way it's going to be, I'd say that is more fair. But if it could be, oh well, I don't know, we're going to go with the hot hand. I mean, there's a million ways this could go for this, quarterback rotation, and a lot of them maybe aren't so good, which is why I'm saying just play the rookies at this point. Um, the Deontay Johnson thing is certainly going to be, interesting because here's a guy at one time was a second team All Pro, and I don't think anybody's, doubting whether or not he has still the ability and the talent. It's whether or not he can, keep himself towing the line and, playing, the good soldier, of course. Cedric Tillman probably has been the key to what can be deemed a successful wide receiver room in 2025. You get that 3-week stretch of what Cedric Tillman gave you last year, and again, I think it was October 20th to November 3rd, something like that. And it was 6 receptions for 75 yards a game and a touchdown a game. You can get that type of guy in Cedric Tillman. You add in Njoku. You add in certainly Jeudy. You certainly add in Deontay Johnson if he can. Again, he's a 2 guy. 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. That is literally what Deontay Johnson can be. None of us know. All on him. Add in the rookie running backs, of course, Judd and of course Sampson. Both of those guys should be able to contribute a little bit more regularly in the passing game than we grew accustomed with Nick Chubb over the years. But that is probably one of the key positional units that we are going to be watching, over the next few weeks. Certainly from the end of July through August. There's a bunch of other guys in there. Where does David Bell fit? Is there a possibility? David Bell, who had a moment or two in 2023, looked like he was finding a zone, a way to contribute in 2024 before it all ended really early with a really bad hip injury. But that's, the reality of it, and, the Browns, there is nothing probably that will happen this year at the quarterback position for the Browns in 2025 that is going to stop me from taking a quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft, especially when I own 2 first-round picks. I'm going to throw as many guys in that room as I possibly can to one of these guys, shows they can be what they are. But as to where the draft capital would be spent on that second first-round pick in 2026, that is absolutely wide open. Could be spent on the offensive line, could be spent at the wide receiver position. I wanted to spend it on a pass rusher this year, so don't think I won't be looking for a pass rusher, hopefully, that can, give you Abdul Carter type stuff. Won't spend it on a linebacker. Never would. Corner, you got Martin Emerson in a contract here. You got Greg Newsome in a contract here. Safety, sure. Find me one worthy of the pick, of course. I would say defensively, the position we're probably looking at, and look, a lot of eyes certainly are going to be on, interior defensive line with Mason Graham. A lot of eyes are certainly going to be at the linebacker position, trying to overcome the loss of JOK, and also everybody wanting to see just, what Carson Swissinger can be and how fast can he be it. But I think I'm definitely, and safety's there, of course, but it's also defensive end for me as well. I mean, Miles, Isaiah, Alex Wright, Joe Tryon. Who's the fifth guy? Does it matter? Do they still bring in another guy? Certainly all possible as well. It's a long list of guys that are on this team right now. And, I know a couple of guys over the OBR were, pontificating about, throwing together, an article on a 53-man roster. And they were like, oh, you should do an episode on it, and I looked down, I was like, a lot of names here. I mean, a lot of the concrete stuff, of course. Three quarterbacks, it's going to be Sanders and Gabriel. We can banter back and forth whether you think it's Flacco or whether you think it's Pickett, right? Running back room, Jerome Ford, Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson. Boom, done. There's a room. Wide receiver, Judy, Johnson, Tillman. Where's the rest of it shake out? Tight end room. Only got two right now. Besides, maybe some guys that were brought in UDFA. But of course, David and Harold. Offensive line. I think pretty good idea there, too. Secondary, you're not sure. So again, we're going to get the full schedule tomorrow. As I mentioned, the Browns obviously have the AFC East on the schedule this year again. Browns also have the NFC North on the schedule this year. Throw in a 49ers game, that gives you that odd number that gets you to 17, of course. And then, of course, 3 with your AFC North foes at home, 3 with your AFC North foes on the road. Then you get, the Raiders as the last place team in the AFC West. And then, of course, the Tennessee Titans in the last place team in the AFC South. Let's have some fun with that one. Let's go Titans Browns. Thursday night football. Ward, maybe Sanders, maybe Gabriel, 2 rookie quarterbacks going at it. 2 teams trying to flip the narrative for their franchises. That'd be a fun one. Might be the only primetime game the Browns get. Although I do have my questions about that. I do. With Shedeur on the roster, and look, everybody sees, what his name brings. And, you had some of the bigger names in NFL media out here in Cleveland last Friday and Saturday covering this. And a lot of it, of course, has to do, of course, with Deion Sanders' son, Shedeur Sanders, playing quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. It's just the way it goes. White hot last name. The name is a trigger. The name is a pulse. The name brings attention. The fact that, a lot of people feel he was unjustly dragged during the draft process makes him now the more likable, easier to root for guy. Either liked me or didn't. We don't need that other stuff or the fluff that goes around it. But again, we'll all be here tomorrow night giving you our thoughts after the schedule is released. Breaking down the 17-game slate, pitfalls. When do we see the rookie quarterbacks? All of these things. So, much like we did for the draft, we hope we'll all come out again tomorrow night and sit through it with us. Hopefully your Cavaliers pull off a win tonight, keep their season going. I know a lot of you guys, I know a lot of you, and I'm reading it all on social media about, how it's all falling apart so quickly here. And I feel for you all. Team looked like it had an absolute ton of promise. But again, I'm Jeff Lloyd. This has been Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. We appreciate you all for the support for the site, reading all the written content every day for the OBR streaming network, starting every night at 6 o'clock with Browns 3D, hosted by myself. Different shows coming at you every night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We appreciate you all for coming out and spending some time with us. We do our damnedest to give you guys some of the best content, some of the best talking points that we absolutely can. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR over on Twitch. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR. And we'll talk to you all tomorrow.